Good, thanks. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Charles Shapiro, President of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. Our program today is a conversation with Tal Schneider, political reporter for the Times of Israel and former Washington correspondent of the Times of Israel. I want to give a special welcome to Alex Gandler, who's the Deputy Consul General of Israel in the Southeastern United States. And we've got with us World Affairs Council members from not just Atlanta, but from Charlotte, Dallas, Fort Worth, Naples, Florida, and Northern Michigan. Let me just some real quick data on Israel so that people have this in mind. The population is 8.7 million. Of that, 74% are Jewish, 21% are Arab. The country is 92% urban, which is higher than either the US or UK. Economy is $400 billion. Per capita income is $40,000 per year, about the same as the United Kingdom. And just to remind, Israel has a parliamentary system of government where parties need a majority in the 120-seat Knesset to form a majority and take power. Today's program is brought to you by the members of the World Affairs Council. So if you're not a member, please join. And a reminder, please submit your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, not chat, but the Q&A function, please. And it will help me a lot. If your questions are short, please use your name. I'm not going to ask any anonymous questions. And do not make speeches for or against. Just this, we're trying to deal with facts, okay? Anat Sultan-Dadon is the Consul General of Israel in the Southeastern United States, actually way more than the Southeast, from Missouri to the Atlantic. So that's a huge swath of the US. And she is joining us from Israel. Anat is going to introduce the program and the speaker. And Anat, first of all, tell us, where are you in Israel?
Right, so I am I'm spending most of my time in Jerusalem, but Mitzveh Ramon. I was just explaining to Charles that highly recommend visiting a beautiful area in southern Israel. But I will be brief in my introduction because I am so that Tal Schneider has agreed to join us. I know that for the many years that I've been representing Israel, one of the things that baffle people the most is our political system and what is going on with Israel's politics. And I think even more so over these last 2 years, which have been rather turbulent, but we do have a new government in place, a new coalition in place, which is why the title for this event is about Israel's new, in parenthesis, political landscape. The new is in parenthesis because the political landscape has actually always been there. It is just that different actors are now coming to the front. As Charles mentioned, Tal Schneider is a political correspondent for the Times of Israel. She's also a former DC correspondent for the Israeli daily newspaper Ma'ariv, Globe's business political correspondent and political blogger, previously running her own political blog. Ms. Schneider is a frequent and brilliant commentator on Israeli radio and TV stations. She's also the recipient of the 2015 Ometz Public Courage and Integrity Award and the 2012 Google Digital Excellence in Journalism Award. Her stories have appeared in Globes, Haaretz, The Marker, Ma'ariv, Mako, basically any media, mainstream media platform in Israel. So thank you so much to the World Affairs Council of Atlanta for hosting, and Tal Schneider, thank you for agreeing to join.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anat. Anat, I'm going to ask you to mute your camera so that the audience only sees Tal and me. Thank you. So Tal, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us today.
Sure, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so I mean, you must get asked this all the time. How in the world can you explain what's going on in Israeli politics? 4 elections in 2 years, 3 of which resulted in no government, and now finally a government with what, a 1-vote majority in the Knesset?
Yes, Yeah, this is right. We are still in the crisis. Basically, when the government was formed, people are thinking that maybe we are out of the bush, we are into a regular circular of political life, but the atmosphere here is still in the crisis. Having said that, we have a new prime minister after 12 years of a very dominant Netanyahu role of this country. We are in a new era. So those four election cycles, 3 of them did not produce any results, any resolution. Then came the 4th election cycle, and lots of politicians said and did. Basically, they said, we are not going to have a 5th election no matter what, because the numbers were very complicated for the 4th election. And at a certain point of time during April and May, it seemed as if the country will go to another election. And it's just devastating, because for another election, nothing is going to be changed in the formation and in the system. You can't change the system while you are at elections. So, the deadlock was with us, and it's still with us. But we do have a government with a new leadership, and we, the one of the most important and maybe theme that is less talked about is that we changed the generation. So Netanyahu, again, who was heading the country for 12 years, he's now about 71. I think he's approaching 72. And our new prime minister is 49 years old. His co-partner, the foreign affairs minister, and is actually the prime minister in waiting. Yair Lapid is around 54 or 55, I think. And the entire ministers are between the ages of 45 to 55. Only one minister is at the age of Netanyahu, and that's the diaspora minister, Nachman Shai. Dr. Nachman Shai, maybe he lived in Atlanta for the last year or so. And he is the only one who is in Netanyahu's, age group. The rest of them are very young, around my age. And I think also down to earth, people that were not in leadership. Some of them were. The defense minister, Gantz, obviously was in leadership, and he's a little bit older, he's 60. But, and Avigdor Lieberman, who is now the finance minister, also around 60, and also was, foreign affairs minister, defense minister, so he's more experienced. But the rest of them, we have, progressive ministers coming from the labor and merits, about 4 or 6 new ministers. And then we have other parties with, people who were never ministers before. So it's very, very interesting, very fresh, and very problematic.
Well, let's talk about the problematic part. You've got an 8 parties sounds crazy in a coalition. Germany and Canada and the UK have 3 parties in total. And so you've got eight parties in the governing coalition, and I assume an equal number of parties in the opposition, or something close to that. How stable is this government likely to be? Is it going to be able to maintain its majority and hold together? And how does that work?
So we've been into the process for a month now. It's unstable. This coalition is having huge problems to get the majority. Last night was a very good example to that. They were aiming to change some of the rabbinate law. I will not go into details, just to say that the Minister of Religious Affairs, coming from the Prime Minister party, his name is Matan Kahana. They put forward a bill that the body that elects the rabbinate court's appointee will have more women in this cabinet, in this choosing body. And this bill was discussed and it was put forward, and it went through all of the phases up until the last vote. And in the very far last vote, it was like hundreds of votes, on reservations and so on. And at the far end, it was actually after a sleepless night, the chairman of the Knesset. So this is someone who is equivalent to Nancy Pelosi. He was mistakenly voting no instead of yes on his, on his digital machine, and the law fell. And it was horrific to watch that because they worked so hard, and it wasn't even, they had a majority, but without him, the majority came down from 51-49 to 50-50. And, the law fell, and they will have to take it back to the committee and bring it up again in 2 weeks. It's not too bad, but I mean, they wasted 48 hours of votes. I mean, you have to go over all the process. So it was just really kind of a horrific scene to see that. They are stretched. One MK was in the hospital, another MK was flying over to United States to get, he's adopting a kid. So, I mean, they don't have any room for maneuvering. And for that reason, the Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, Yair Lapid, they have to be in presence at the parliament at all times, during day and night. It's tough.
Wow. So if you had to bet, how long is this government going to last? Can it make it through a year?
That's a good question. They have, I just gave you a glimpse to the problems. They have lots of other problems. Maybe one of the biggest problem is the Islamic movement party named Ra'am. That's R-A-A-M. That party represents Israel's religious Islamic citizens. So in the Arab society, for those who don't know, we have about 20 to 21% of Israel are Arab. So every fifth citizen here is an Arab. Most of them, like 19% are Muslims. And they have several different parties. Some of those parties came together to a joint list, but Ra'am, who represents the most religious faction of the Israeli Arabs, is in the government. Now, it doesn't have a ministerial job, but it's part of the coalition. That's another, when you say they skip the generation, it's a lot of fresh ideas and so on. This is like unprecedented.
So there's never been an Arab party allied with the government.
Well, you had Arab politicians in the government. It was very rare. It happened once during Rabin times. You have Arab ministers, like Druze ministers, who are not representing the all Arab society. So this is like the Islamic movement, the Islamic movement of Israel. This is very rare. And I think when the country was founded in 49, they had 2 Arabs in some sort of but it's not the same. This party signed a coalition agreement written. And usually the Arabs, they say, we will support the government from the outskirts. We will not vote against it. We will not topple it. I mean, this was what's happening. This was the case during Rabin times. So Rabin times, this is 25 or 26 years ago. So never since then, but also for the first time signing an agreement. And, you have Arab politicians who are coming up to the cameras and saying, we don't care about the Palestinian issue. We want to take care of infrastructure, electricity, education, health system, and Bedouin villages. So, I mean, they say it. I mean, it's not like they completely dropped the Palestinian issue, but they say, okay, but our, preferences are different. And that's the reason they're inside the government. And, but they do have a lot of problems with this coalition. For example, they were also trying to vote yesterday for a cannabis bill that would, people that are smoking in their houses will not be subject to a police, enforcement of brutality. Now, lots of young Arabs are subject to police brutality, and this is supposed to be in the interest of this party. But they came up and said, we are ultra-Orthodox. I mean, they are the ultra-Orthodox of the Muslims. And we say no to drugs, and that's it. No discussion. And it's a huge problem because they signed an agreement under which they commit themselves to be part of this coalition. And in this coalition agreement, one of the topics, one of the clauses says, semi-legalization of cannabis. So we know what's the deal. They are breaking the agreement. And, the coalition did not have the numbers for that. And they had to pull the bill and say, we will enter it in 2 weeks from now. So, I mean.
And I can imagine Netanyahu and his allies are not just sitting around with their hands crossed. I assume they're trying to actively bring down the new government, correct?
Netanyahu was a very, very powerful prime minister, very powerful. I don't think this country ever witnessed such a powerful prime minister. And now he is the most powerful head of opposition we ever seen. You got to give it to him. They vote against everything, even on security issues, even on, defense issues, items for which you would expect this party of Likud, who claim to be, pro-security, nationalist issues. You would expect them to be not on the sidelines, but they vote against some of the stuff. It was actually kind of a funny moment last night when, as I told you, Ram, the Islamic movement, there was a security bill a week ago. Ram, the Islamic movement, did not want to vote for that bill. But after discussion and negotiation, they had no choice, and 2 of them voted for that bill. When the Likud voted against it, this is called the unification bill. It is making sure that Palestinians that live in the territories will not, get a permit to sit inside Israel through a way of marriage. It's an old bill that is being renewed every year. So they went against their belief and voted for it, whereas Likud voted against it, and then the bill did not pass. That was a week ago. And then when Mansour Abbas, that's the chair of Ram, was standing on the plenum, he was heckled from the crowd, from the Likudnik. And one of them, called him and said, Mansour, you became a Zionist because you voted for this bill who promotes, the Jewish majority. And he said, I did not become a Zionist last week. I only voted because of coalition constraints, but you, the Likudnik, you became an anti-Zionist. So because you voted again.
Right.
So I mean, it was jokes and laughs, but it's kind of goes to show you how combative the opposition is and what the switch of roles we are seeing here.
So I mean, lots of irony is people exactly they switch sides, switch roles, give things they oppose they support, and things they support they now oppose.
Meretz, who is the Green Liberal Party, who was the party who was going on against the unification bill for 18 years. They took this bill to High Court. They fought against this bill. They demonstrated against it, and last week they voted for that bill.
Wow. Okay, so let me ask you the same question again. So how long, if you were betting your own money, how much money, and would you bet $100 that this government would last 4 years? Are they going to reach the point where, they have, which seems to Americans, this crazy idea of changing the prime minister after 2 years, of doing a handoff. Will they make it to the handoff?
Well, I think at this point in Israel political life, it's really unfair to ask me to predict anything. Needless to say, when you put the Israeli politics aside, you have wars, pandemic, depression, economy is down, and tourism is down, and unemployment is up, and we have threats. I don't know if you're following what's going on in Lebanon today or in this month, and we just had a Gaza war a month and a half ago. We had riots in the streets between Jewish and Arabs, scenes that we have never seen before here. So, the conventional wisdom is to say that if they pass the budget, then everything is okay until March 23. But, passing a budget is difficult, and it seems like, very challenging operation at the moment when you don't even able to pass a bill like, simple bills, and budget is like a mustard bill. So
let me ask you a question. If the budget doesn't pass, does the government automatically fall? I mean, is
yes.
that
That's what happened back in December of 2020. Netanyahu did not pass the budget. He had a majority of 74, not 61. He could have passed the budget, but he chose not to promote the budget. He figured that he will let the budget go by unvoted. And because it went by unvoted, it's automatically dissolved the Knesset. Now, I think that was done by a choice, by a decision. It was not done. I mean, this government at the moment wants to pass the budget, and everybody are eager to do it. So they have the political motives, and they need to work there. They need to go on a boot camp to get themselves, like how do you say, like when a company goes out for a retreat to get all the workers work together, they need like government retreats to get things flowing, because they're having a really hard time controlling their members of the Knesset, their MKs.
So I'm going to ask you, can you give sort of a short summary? If you've got this very diverse coalition of 8 parties, what are they in favor of in terms of foreign policy, the economy? What are they in favor of? I know what they're opposed to, which was the Netanyahu government, but what is it they are in favor of?
So on the diplomatic scene and on the Palestinian issue, let's say that they decided, they made a decision not to make decisions. That means no two-state solution, but no annexation. You have Naftali Bennett, who is pro-annexation, and Gideon Sa'ar, who is now justice minister, also for annexation of at least some parts. Benny Gantz, who is the defense minister, proclaimed to be pro-annexation of the Jordan Valley, for example. And then you have Lapid, Meretz, Labour, who are, not agreeing to that, and obviously Ram. And there is another party, Avigdor Lieberman, the Israel Beitenu is leaning more to the right wing of annexation. But so no two-state solution and no annexation. And I have to tell you, maybe your World Affairs Council think it's a big deal, but if you want to be truthful about that, in the Palestinian Authority right now, there is an 87 or 86 years old ailing leader who is unable to go to election. On his side, and I think nobody expects Israel to promote anything at the moment with someone who doesn't control. I mean, there is a problem on the Palestinian Authority.
Right.
It's like the comfortable problem, but really, I mean, this government will be unable to do anything on that front, and we don't think the other government will be able to do anything on that front as well. So, on that, but on the Iranian issue, I think this government is opposing, the entire government is opposing the JCPOA #2. We now know that the JCPOA...
I'm going to interrupt you. The JCPOA is the Iran nuclear deal, just so right. No, yeah.
I don't think they gave it the name of JCPOA #2. They just say they want to return to the Iran nuke deal, and this right now, today, this moment in time, it seems unlikely that the United States will proceed with the negotiation anyways, because of the change of government in Iran and the problems in Iran. So this government still opposes the agreement. Having said that, they proclaimed during campaign, and they kept on proclaiming that after the campaign and through the process of the government building, that they will maintain a better relationship with the White House. This is a huge shift of agenda. Netanyahu keeps saying, even today as head of opposition, he says, and he said it in the Knesset a couple of times in the last month, and he keeps saying it in public statements, that he wants, he thinks any government of Israel should conduct a public fight with the current president and with the United States on the issue of Iran. He doesn't say it in these words. He says, for the interest of the state of Israel, we have to be public about our opposition. And Yair Lapid and Bennett both promised. It's not that they're not public about it, they talk about it, but they are handling the situation completely different. And I will give you one little example. I know it's you are a World Affairs Council, so I don't mind going deep into that. But I had a breaking story this week, a couple of days ago, in the Times of Israel. The new national security advisor picked by Bennett is a person who, from the Mossad, actually, he's a career diplomat, career Mossadnik for many, many years, for 23 years, and he is also a PhD for physics. A brilliant guy, and he was really behind the scene. I mean, I never heard the name before until a week ago, but since we heard the name, we went to check up, and we found out, I mean, I found out that when the first JCPOA was negotiated during, between 2013 to 2015, again, the JCPOA, it's the agreement with Iran, he was part of the group inside the Mossad that thought this agreement is legit, and that this agreement, it's, how do you say that? The lesser evil?
Lesser of two evils.
So he thought that Israel is better off with the agreement than with the situation with no agreement. Now, it's, why this is so important. This is hugely important because this is the national security advisor picked by Bennett. This is the person that Bennett goes to the White House with. This is like Jack Sullivan's, equivalent here. And it's a very high-ranking officer. I mean, he's not an officer, it's like high-ranking security establishment person next to the prime minister. This is your, this is how you present yourself to the world. And I think he was picked because of his, skills, not because of this specific notion. But obviously he's more expert on the Iranian issue than the Palestinian issue. And he was the head of unconventional weapon department in the Mossad for many years. So that gives you an understanding, I mean, what Bennett means when he says, I'm going to have a better relationship with this administration. So I'm going to have a person, at the top level of my staff that is open to hear different versions of, diplomatic schemes, as opposed to Netanyahu's, who was completely shut himself out of any type of, negotiation or anything. So it's a big difference, to my opinion. And now Naftali Bennett keeps on saying, I'm opposing the agreement. And he will keep on saying that, because, stuff that politicians are saying also slated to the ears of the public. But, I suppose that behind the scene, we're going to see a very different way of working.
We've got a bunch of questions coming in from the audience, but 3 or 4 of them ask about the electoral system. Is there any chance of changing it, either increasing the threshold for a party to win seats in the Knesset, so that there are fewer parties, or limiting the number of terms a prime minister can hold?
Well,
it sounds like with such a tight majority, it'd be hard to change anything.
Well, I see all the questions, but I did not read them in details. I have to tell you, when you assume that raising the threshold will take the number of parties down, that's an assumption that was not proven in Israel. Why am I saying it? Because the threshold was 2% until a decade ago, and it was raised to 3.25, and we did not see, we actually have more parties now. So the parties, the multi-party system does not come from changing the bill.
Threshold, yeah.
It comes from the norms and behavior and political behaviorship. This is like a whole science, political science, I think, thesis, but it comes from the people. Because, let's say you're going to have a threshold of 15%, and then you're going to have only 2 major parties or 4 major parties. Then what? the division among the society, the division among the different groups of people are going to appear in a different form. They will appear inside a party instead of appearing as multi-party. So you're going to have a huge Likud with people inside the Likud representing different sectors, because you raise the threshold, you cannot erase the diverse society.
Yeah.
We have Muslims, we have ultra-Orthodox, we have immigrants, we have, I am a secular liberal here in the center of Israel. So there are a bunch of us also still. You have settlers, and you also have a division on ethnic groups. May I remind you that between 70 to 50 years ago, all of the people here came from Morocco, Germany, United States, Iran, and some even came from China. So, I mean, very little, but you have Romanian Jews, Belgian Jews, Iraqi Jews, Syrian, Egyptian, Tunisian. I mean, you want to get all of these people, and they feel fractured. This is not something that probably cannot be changed in a 70 years. I don't know when, but it's very fractured. And on top of everything, 21%, Arabs. So
sure. Jack Siegel is a former U.S. Foreign Service officer who served in the embassy in Tel Aviv back in the late 80s, early 90s. And he asked, do the Palestinians have any basis to be hopeful about the new coalition? He says, Prime Minister Rabin said, when we will have peace when the Palestinians have hope. Do the Palestinians have any hope?
Well, which side of the Palestinians? We have Gaza, that elected in 2006 a terror organization to run the area, and they keep bombing Israel night and day. I mean, we had to run. This is just like 2 months ago. I'm sitting here in the center. I'm not in Tel Aviv. I'm in suburbs, but we had to. I have 3 kids in the house. We had to run to the basement 5 times a day. So we have that, and then we have the Palestinians in the West Bank, which is a whole different story. And they want to prosper. They want to do business. They want to live a normal life, and at least most of them. And I think that the addition of the Ra'am, the Islamic movement, to the coalition, it's an amazing historic event. Unthinkable until this political crisis brought to us something that we never thought would happen. And it's really, really historic. And until today, I just can't believe that Ram actually entered the coalition. We were not completely surprised because Mansour Abbas talked about it constantly. But the other side, the Jewish side, was more problematic. And 2 weeks ago, I don't want to proclaim here that things are going to change overnight. But for example, the Interior Minister, Ayelet Shaked, she went on the plenum in the Knesset. She started to talk about this unification bill that I was just discussing 10 minutes ago. And she, in the past, she was all, strong-headed, unwilling to compromise. She went on the plenum stand, and she actually explained how some of the Palestinians are suffering horrifically from that bill. And because of the public debate on that bill, because the Likud opposed the bill, obviously it's a Likud bill, by the way. The Likud put that bill, the government is in power, month and 2 days. The Likud put that bill a month and 10 days ago. It's a Likud bill.
Mhm.
She went up on the stadium. I mean, and in the past, it's a bill that has to be passed, voted on every year for extension. In the past, all of the opposition voted for that bill because opposition, chaired by Yair Lapid, for example, they did not even think about opposing anything like that. So during the discussion, during the debate, we had a huge public discourse about that bill. The results of a public discourse, because every year this bill would pass automatically. But what happened this year was that it was put on a discourse, merit, on the merits. And people actually talked about what is that bill doing to the Palestinians' families. And they actually, because the media was so obsessed with the bill, I mean, obviously because this bill is so important, so the media people brought on air, on radio, on TV, Palestinian families that are living for 30 or maybe 20 years inside Israel and do not have, driving license, do not have a passport because of this bill. And actually, when the interior minister, she went on the stand and she started on the podium and she started to give examples of those families. And I was listening to her, I was like, oh my God, she never talked like that. Now, I'm not going to say here that Ayelet Shaked is a changed person and she became a pacifist and she, like a pro-peace person. No, it's not the case. But obviously, she had to listen to the problems.
Yes.
She had to sit with Mansour Abbas in the room and hear him out. And Bennett, as the prime minister, had to bring in Meretz, the 6 members of the Meretz party, into the chambers of the prime minister and listen to their claims. And that can change. That can have an effect within, I don't know, down the road someday.
We've got a couple of questions that ask about a two-state solution. I mean, you already alluded to it.
Let me just say one more thing.
Sure.
This is like having the Tea Party as a president, bringing Justice Democrats into the Oval Office, trying to find a compromise with this. This is what happened. This is like a Tea Party politician going on the podium and saying, well, listen, I hear the Justice Democrats and I hear the progressive, and some of the things that they say make logic, and let me think about it. I mean, it's crazy. Can you?
I cannot imagine it in my country. So really, under our system, it would never, I don't say never, but it certainly isn't happening now.
But this is a comparison to my understanding. I know Justice Democrats, right? This is the progressive side of the Democratic Party.
So a couple of questions are about a two-state solution. You already alluded to it, and you said the head of the Palestinian Authority is old and ailing, and that nobody would negotiate now. Is there? I mean, I don't know. Among the Israeli population, do you see the possibility of a two-state solution?
No.
Never, or not.
Well, it's what, 53 years now?
Yeah.
Is there any person around the world who think this is still, viable?
So what's the alternative? I mean, what is the alternative?
Well, this is just my opinion. This is not, the common understanding of the people in the country. This is not the understanding of the politicians here. This is just me saying this as a person and as a
Sure.
reporter. And please do not think this is a common stand. This is not a common stand. I think we are living in a one-state solution for 50, 40, 30 years. Count whenever from whenever you want to count it. And we are living in a one-state solution. And the sooner that we will face this fact. This is the fact of life. You can say whatever you want, but we are living in a one-state solution, and the sooner we recognize that, the faster we'll come up with a different approach, a fresh approach. Because I do not see another evacuation of Jewish citizens from Judea and Samaria. The evacuation from Gaza was a huge, how would you say that? Took its toll for many years to come, and I don't see any leader in Israel society, and I don't see the Israeli society willing to go through another process like that. On the other hand, I don't want any Palestinian to leave his house. I don't want any Arab to leave his house. I don't want any Jewish to leave his house. So yeah, it is what it is. I mean, you got to look in the mirror and recognize that this is it. I mean, it's not going to change. Not in my lifetime.
I told you we're going to talk for 45 minutes, and we're almost there. Can you stick around a little bit longer? Can I ask you a couple more questions?
Sure.
Good. Okay. If you've got time, I've got just a couple more questions. A friend of mine who lives here but lived in Israel for a long time says that every time the Israeli Defense Force goes into battle against Hamas, tunnels, weapons stockpiles in Gaza or whatever, that the IDF, the Defense Force, meets its military objectives, but that Hamas always wins the battle for international public opinion. Is that an accurate statement? Would you agree with that? And is there tension within is there a defense cabinet? As people make their decisions about what to do on security issues, do they take into account the international repercussions?
They do, but you have to protect the population here. We are 9 million people. We cannot, I suppose, even if the entire world is against us, we cannot live under rockets attack. I don't think any nation would agree that its citizen would be bombarded like that. And the international community is heard very loudly here. We actually, I think, on the last Gaza operation, the government was still headed by Netanyahu, and he got quite a support from DC, but also from around the world. And as long as there is a terror organization running a place and they are saying it out loud that their purpose is to destroy us, what can you do? I mean, by the way, my son is a soldier in the military, but what can you do? What can you do? I mean, this is the story of Israel since the day it was born. Every time there is on the other hand, by the way, Israel can do a lot to help the neighbors. We can have a good neighboring, neighborhood relationship. For example, we had this amazing project when we had a hospital in Syria during the Syria civil war. Israel brought in people that were wounded and healed them and let them go back to wherever they wanted. Israel put a lot of money into that project. I think we now see what's going on in Lebanon. We can definitely assist Lebanon. We don't have to assist with the Israel tag on. We can actually, I was talking to someone from the security operation and I said, what can we do? And he said, we can purchase lots of baby food and medicine. We can upload it on a ship. The ship doesn't have to carry the Israeli flag or the Israeli name or the Israeli recognition. It can go through Cyprus or through Greece, with the Greek being on the front line. And, we can help, we can do it. We are in a very good relationship with the Egyptians, very good. I mean, if you want to give some really good points to Netanyahu, then in his 12 years of leadership, his relationship with the Egyptians they're booming, really. The relationship with Jordan were very bad. Netanyahu actually kind of, ruined the relationship. And now the new government has made it its first, order of business to restore relationship. And it's working. I mean, it's just started, but, Bennett was already there. The foreign affairs minister was already there. We have, peace accords with the Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain, Sudan. This is the work of Netanyahu. Let's give him the credit for that. That's the work of Trump. Let's give Trump some credit and Jared Kushner credit for that work. I mean, they worked very hard for that. And, this is an amazing, I was on Tuesday, 2 days ago, I was at the embassy opening of the Arab Emirates in Tel Aviv. They opened an embassy in the stock exchange building in downtown Tel Aviv, the business district of Tel Aviv. We have the Emirates anthem playing in the heart of Tel Aviv, the flag raised, Israel's presidents came to bless. It was just amazing. So, as you can hear from me, it's very complicated. It's not all about, the terror from Gaza. And I just want to, Charles, if that's okay, I just want to complete one notion from a previous question. You asked me what this government can do and cannot do. And I started to talk about foreign relations, but I did not mention that this government is planning to do a lot on the economy. We have, like, when you had the new president coming in and saying, we have to take first of the COVID and putting the economy back on track, and hospital system and health system, education system. So this government is about employment. It's about healthcare system and so on. So there's a lot of work on that front. We did not have a budget for 2.5 years.
Keith Valentine asked, has the U.S. Embassy completely moved to Jerusalem? Is there? It's up and it's functioning normally. Do they have now a consulate in Tel Aviv? How is that working?
So first, we don't have an ambassador yet.
Right.
Thomas Nides is still in the U.S. I don't think he even started the Senate hearing. So we don't have an ambassador at the moment. The embassy, there is a Jerusalem building for the embassy, and there are some functions that are being taken care out of there. The acting ambassador, his name is Ratney, I think, if I'm not mistaken by the spelling or by the way I pronounce it, Ratney or Retney, something like that. He is living in Jerusalem. So I don't know where he lives, but he's sitting in Jerusalem. He did not go back to Herzliya or Tel Aviv. So he is in Jerusalem. So the embassy is there, his office is there. I think the Tel Aviv branch of the embassy is working from the same location. I just drove by the building a couple of days ago. It's under huge renovation. So I suppose most of the stuff is not in the building, probably in another location in Tel Aviv. But most of the secular section and cultural section and so on, they are in business section, they are operating from Tel Aviv because they need a huge building from Jerusalem and they don't have it yet. So it's a work, to my opinion, to my understanding, it's a work in process. It's not going to go back to Tel Aviv. The next ambassador will need a house in Jerusalem. I don't know where. I suspect the consulate, also the Palestinian consulate on Agron Street, an historic building and a small and historic chanting building will probably open up back to the Palestinians, but it is a sensitive subject here and in the United States. So I don't know about the consulate, but I suppose it will open because this is a campaign promise of the president. So it probably will happen.
Well, Tal Schneider, let me thank you so much. This has been great 50 minutes now. It's very, very useful. Lots of terrific information. And I have to tell you, you said something that almost every single one of our speakers says, and that is that it's complicated. And of course, it is complicated. Life is complicated, and public policy, whether it's in Israel or France or Korea or the United States, is super, super complicated. And there are always layers within layers and ways to analyze it. And I want to thank you for helping us understand in a way you can't get just from reading the media in the US, what's going in Israel and understanding the political landscape.
Sure.
And Anat, I hope please turn your camera back on. Anat, thank you so much for putting us together with Tal and for helping us arrange this. I want to thank you so much. This has been super, super useful. To our audience members, I've got 3 requests for you. The first one is the one I always make, and that is join the World Affairs Council. You don't need to go to Aspen or Sun Valley or Davos to hang out with opinion makers and influencers and smart people. You can be live with Tal Schneider right here through the World Affairs Council. So please join and support us so we can do more of this. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we will download this afternoon as soon as we get it edited a little bit, and you'll get notification as soon if you subscribe to the channel. And then thirdly, and this is new, we're looking for interns so for the fall. So if you know anybody who would like to intern with the World Affairs Council, please let us know. Tal, I've got to do some advertising for myself here. We've got some upcoming meetings next week. Next Wednesday, we haven't announced the first announcement. We'll do a flash briefing on Cuba, and the expert on Cuba is going to be me, since that's something I worked on throughout my career. So we'll do that next Wednesday at noon. On Thursday, the 27th, we've got Canada and the United States, friends, partners, and allies with Kristen Hillman, the ambassador of Canada to the United States. And then in August, we've got a program with Fiona Hill, who former senior director for European and Russian affairs at the National Security Council and author of a book on Putin, and the topic is going to be Putin's Russia. Thank you again, Anat Sultan-Dadon, Consul General of Israel, Valerin Lopez DeFrank, our producer who made this come together, Laura Brower, our social media specialist, and Henna Rennie, the Council's interim program director. And above all, Tal Schneider, political reporter for the Times of Israel. Thank you. This has been great. I hope you'll join us again. When things get even more complicated, we're going to turn to you to explain.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining me today.